Vincent Moore. I'm 62 years old. The party was at some fancy venue in downtown Denver. Glass chandeliers, polished marble floors, the kind of place where even the waiters looked like they were auditioning for magazine ads. Natalia had insisted on the best of everything for little Andrew's naming ceremony. I'd written the check without question, just like I always did. The room was full of Bennett's business associates from Aldrich Press, sharp suits, perfect hair, and their wives dripping in jewelry so extravagant I couldn't even pronounce the brand names. My side of the family was represented by my sister Janet and her husband, sitting quietly at the far end of the table, out of the main current of conversation. I sat at the family table, watching Natalia hold court with her new in-laws. She looked radiant in that way new mothers do, skin glowing, makeup carefully applied to look effortless. Bennett stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder, the picture of a devoted husband. Across the room, Jeremiah beamed like he'd just hit the jackpot. Jeremiah had married Natalia's mother when Natalia was 16. Perfect timing for him. He got his swooping right when all the hard work was done. I'd spent the first 15 years teaching her to ride a bike, helping with homework, sitting up all night when she had the flu. Jeremiah got to be the fun guy who took her shopping and paid for her college without having to deal with the messy parts of actually raising a child. But I kept my mouth shut. I always did. When they called everyone's attention for the toast, I braced myself for the usual, something polite, something vague, a few warm words about family and new beginnings. Natalia raised her glass, smiling. I want to thank everyone for coming, she said, her voice carrying easily across the room. Bennett and I are so grateful for the love and support you've shown us and little Andrew. We feel so lucky to have such wonderful family around us. She turned then, looking directly at Jeremiah. And I especially want to thank you. You've always been there for me. You'll be the only grandfather my child will ever know. The words landed like a punch to the ribs. Not one of the grandfathers, the only one. I swallowed hard, forcing my expression to stay neutral. My hand tightened around the stem of my glass until I thought it might snap. Janet leaned toward me and whispered, Vincent, I'm fine. I cut her off, standing before she could say anything else. I excused myself to get some air, but nobody noticed. They were too busy congratulating Jeremiah on his new role as the family patriarch. I stood on the venue's balcony, the city spread out in front of me like a postcard, Denver's skyline glittering under the evening lights. Somewhere below, I could still hear the muffled hum of laughter and clinking glasses from inside. A coldness settled in my chest, slow and steady. It wasn't anger, not exactly. More like clarity. 30 years ago, when Natalia's mother walked out on us, I could have remarried. Could have found someone to help shoulder the load. Someone to share the weight of raising a little girl. But I didn't. I put every ounce of myself into being the best father I could be. Worked double shifts at the construction company. Saved every spare penny for her education. Passed on opportunities, good ones, because Natalia always came first. And now here I was, standing outside her son's naming ceremony, realizing she was erasing me from his life like I'd never even existed. I pulled my phone from my pocket and scrolled to my lawyer's number. Some decisions you make in the heat of the moment. Others, you make when everything finally becomes crystal clear. 24 years ago, I was a different man, a single father working concrete foundations for a construction company, trying to figure out how to braid my 8-year-old daughter's hair before school. Natalia's mother had left us for a sales manager from Phoenix. And just like that, I became everything. Dad, mom, cook, homework helper, bedtime storyteller. I remember the first time Natalia asked me why mommy didn't love us anymore. She was sitting at the kitchen table, coloring in one of those books with the thick black outlines. She didn't even look up right away, just kept dragging a crayon across the page. Then, out of nowhere, she lifted those big, serious brown eyes to mine. Daddy, why doesn't mommy love us? I sat down across from her, my hands still dusty from work, and for a second, I didn't know how to answer. Sweetheart, I said finally, sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Big ones. But that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us. She frowned, pressing harder with the crayon. But she's not here. I'm here, I told her. And I love you enough for both parents. Her little face softened, just a bit. You promise? I promise. And I meant it. Every word. For 15 years, it was just us. I taught her to drive in my old pickup, lurching through the empty grocery store parking lot while she laughed and gripped the wheel like it might bite her. I helped her with algebra homework, hunched over the kitchen table, relearning equations I hadn't seen since I was her age. I sat through every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every teenage crisis about boys, friends, and the supposed unfairness of life. When she graduated high school, she found me in the crowd afterward and hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. I don't know what I would have done without you, Dad. She whispered into my ear. You're my hero. That was 3 months before her mother came back into the picture. Linda had remarried by then. Jeremiah was a regional manager for some insurance company, drove a BMW, lived in a house with a 3-car garage. He had that easy confidence of a man who'd never once worried about how to stretch his paycheck to the end of the month. And suddenly, Natalia was spending weekends in their guest room. A perfectly staged little space Linda had decorated like something straight out of a home design magazine. Plush bedding, soft lighting, coordinated throw pillows. It looked nothing like the mismatched quilt and hand-me-down dresser in her old bedroom at my place. Jeremiah took her shopping for college clothes, bought her a sleek new laptop, talked about investing in her future like he'd invented the concept. I should have seen the shift happening. The way Natalia started comparing my 2-bedroom apartment to Jeremiah's big house. The way she'd casually say, "Jeremiah thinks maybe I should." Finish the sentence with which college she should attend, what career path might suit her, even whether she was dating the right kind of boys. One night over dinner, she mentioned, "Jeremiah says I'd do better in corporate law than teaching. More money, more opportunity." I remember forcing a smile. Jeremiah seems to have a lot of opinions. She laughed, like I was teasing. "He's just looking out for me, Dad." When she got married to Bennett, it was Jeremiah who walked her down the aisle. I remember her sitting across from me at my kitchen table, twisting the engagement ring on her finger when she broke the news. I was thinking, maybe you could do a reading instead. I must have looked surprised, because she rushed to explain. "It's more meaningful. Anyone can walk someone down an aisle, but you're the one who taught me about love and commitment." At the time, I'd been touched, deeply even. Now, I wondered if that was the first step in easing me to the sidelines. I did not say anything then. I was not paying for the wedding, my ex-wife Linda was. So, I knew Linda would never let me walk her down. I kept quiet, made some excuse, and never attended her wedding. The trust fund had been my idea. $2 million set aside when Natalia turned 21, with additional provisions for her future children. My lawyer had suggested attaching conditions, maintaining family relationships, demonstrating respect for the benefactor, regular contact. I'd waved him off. "She's my daughter. Why would I need legal protection for my own child?" He just smiled faintly. "Because, Mr. Moore, people change." I didn't believe him. Back then, I thought love and history were stronger than anything. But lawyers know things about human nature the rest of us only learn the hard way. I drove home in silence after the naming ceremony. My apartment felt smaller than usual, like the walls had crept inward while I was gone. I sank into my recliner and stared at the photo on the side table, Natalia in her cap and gown at her college graduation, grinning at the camera with her arms slung around my shoulders. The trust fund documents were in my filing cabinet, exactly where I'd put them 12 years ago. I spread the trust documents across my kitchen table, smoothing the pages out with both hands like I was preparing blueprints. Then I started reading, line by line, clause by clause, every carefully worded provision my lawyer had insisted on, including all those years ago. And there it was, tucked neatly in the middle of the legal jargon. In the event that the beneficiary publicly disavows, disrespects, or attempts to exclude the grantor from family relationships or significant family events. The so-called respect clause. I could still remember the day Camille had explained it to me. Back then, I'd laughed. "Natalia? Do something like that? Not a chance." Camille had only smiled that knowing smile of hers. "Better to be safe than sorry, Mr. Moore. You'd be surprised what time and influence can do to people." I'd waved her off. I thought I knew my daughter. But the more I read now, the clearer everything became. This wasn't about the money, though $2 million was nothing to shrug at. This was about consequences. About teaching my daughter that actions have weight. That words matter. That you can't just erase people who don't fit the version of the story you want to tell. I pictured little Andrew, 3 months old, soft-cheeked and oblivious, already being steered toward a world where Jeremiah was the only grandfather he'd know. I wondered what Natalia would tell him about me as he grew. Would I be the weird old man who sent birthday cards? The stranger who showed up to family events uninvited? My phone buzzed. A text from Natalia lit up the screen. "Thanks for coming today, Dad." It meant a lot. I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Too little, too late. First thing Monday morning, I called my lawyer. "Vincent," Camille said when she picked up. Her voice was as steady as ever, businesslike, no fluff. "I want to trigger the respect clause," I told her. There was a pause. "Are you sure about this? Once we set it in motion, there's no going back." "I'm sure. And you want to redirect the trust to your goddaughter's child?" "Yes," I said. "Phoebe deserves it more than Natalia ever did." Phoebe, my best friend Oscar's daughter. When Oscar died in that car accident 6 years ago, I'd stepped in to help his wife, Carmen, raise her. Drove her to soccer practice, helped her with homework, taught her to change a tire. She called me Uncle Vincent, and meant it. When her daughter Dahlia was born 2 years ago, Phoebe had asked me to be the godfather. At least someone in this world still valued what I had to offer. That day in the hospital, she'd handed me the tiny, swaddled bundle and said, "I trust you with her, Uncle Vincent. Always." And I believed her. "All right," Camille said over the phone now. "I'll have the papers ready by Thursday." I hung up and realized I felt lighter than I had in months, maybe years. 2 weeks after Andrew's naming ceremony, Camille served Natalia with the documents at her house in Cherry Creek. I didn't want to be there for that conversation. Some things are better handled by professionals who don't have decades of emotion tied up in every word. 20 minutes later, my phone lit up. "Dad, what the hell is this?" Natalia's voice was high and tight, the way it got when she was trying not to cry. "Camille Davis just handed me some legal documents about the trust fund. What's going on?" "You should read them carefully," I said. I was sitting in my truck outside the hardware store, watching people load lumber and paint cans into their cars. Normal people doing normal things. While my life turned a page I never thought I'd have to write. Everything's explained pretty clearly. This says I'm in violation of some respect clause. That's insane. "Dad, I respect you. You know I do." "Do I?" "Of course you do. I invited you to Andrew's ceremony. You were at the family table. And what did you say during your toast?" There was silence on the other end. Long enough that I glanced at my phone to see if the call had dropped. "Dad," she said finally, "I didn't mean. You said Jeremiah would be the only grandfather Andrew ever knows. You said it in front of a room full of people. Does that sound respectful to you?" I was emotional. It was a big day. I wasn't thinking clearly. "You were thinking just fine. You wanted everyone to know where I stand in this family. Well, congratulations. Now you know where you stand with me." She started crying then. Full, raw sobs that might have broken my heart 6 months ago. Now they just sounded like manipulation. "Please don't do this," Natalia said, her voice breaking between words. "We can work it out. I'll apologize publicly if that's what you want. I'll tell everyone you're Andrew's grandfather, too." "Too late for that. Dad, Bennett's business depends on investor confidence. If word gets out that there's family drama, it could affect his partnerships. His company just launched a new imprint. They need stability right now. Not my concern. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to erase me from your son's life." "I wasn't erasing you." "God, you're being so dramatic. This is exactly why Mom left you." The words hit like a slap. They hung in the air between us, thick and acrid, like smoke you can't wave away. "Is that what you think?" I asked quietly. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that." "Yes, you did. And now I know exactly how you see me. The man she was smart enough to leave behind." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Well, here's some news for you, sweetheart. Your mother left because she was selfish, irresponsible, and a cheating 304, not because there was anything wrong with me. And if you want to follow in her footsteps, that's your choice." "Dad, please, can we just meet somewhere and talk about this face to face?" "No, there is nothing to talk about. The trust fund is being transferred to Phoebe and Dahlia. They appreciate family loyalty. You might want to look that up sometime." I ended the call before she could answer. The phone rang again immediately. Then again. Then came the steady ping of incoming text messages, pleas, arguments, maybe threats. I didn't read a single one. I deleted them all, powered the phone off, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Then I drove to Home Depot, walked the wide aisles under the smell of fresh-cut wood and machine oil, picked out the lumber and hardware for a bookshelf I'd been meaning to build. Sometimes you need to work with your hands to clear your head. That evening, the phone on my desk rang, my landline, of all things. Hardly anyone used it anymore except for telemarketers and the occasional wrong number. But when I picked up, it was Phoebe. "Uncle Vincent," she began, her tone carrying a mix of hesitation and urgency. "I just got the strangest call from some lawyer. She said you're setting up a trust fund for Dahlia." $2 million, I said plainly. "For her education and future. Figured it was better invested in someone who actually wants me in their life." There was a pause on the other end, the kind where you can hear someone collecting their thoughts. "Uncle Vincent." Her voice was soft, careful, like she was stepping onto a frozen lake and didn't know if it would hold. "What happened?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. "I told you about the naming ceremony, right? About Natalia's toast." "Bits and pieces," she admitted. So I laid it out. Every detail. How Natalia had smiled like a cat with cream when she clinked her glass. How she'd talked about the legal papers like it was some grand romantic gesture instead of the last nail in the coffin. I told her about the way people had looked at me. Pity from some, thinly veiled amusement from others, and how I'd felt the ground tilt under me. Phoebe didn't interrupt, just made those small, sympathetic sounds she was so good at. A quiet "mm here," a sigh there. She let me speak until the story was wrung dry. "I'm sorry," she said finally, her voice warm and steady. "That must have hurt so much." It did, I admitted. But hurt passes. Stupidity lasts forever. Are you sure about this? It's a lot of money, she said gently. And she's still your daughter. Being someone's father doesn't mean you have to accept being treated like garbage, I said. There was a beat of silence before I added, your dad taught me that. Phoebe was quiet for a long moment. He did always say you were the most stubborn man he'd ever met. Oscar was a smart man. He was. And he'd be proud of what you're doing for Dahlia. After we hung up, I sat there for a while, listening to the faint hum of the house. Something settled in my chest. Peace, maybe, or just the absence of anger. Either way, it felt like progress. 3 days later, I found out just how deep Natalia's betrayal ran. Carmen called me around 8 in the morning. Her voice was tight, clipped, like she was holding back a storm. Vincent, you need to see something, she said. I sat up straighter in my chair. What kind of something? She hesitated, which was never a good sign. Phoebe showed me some messages on social media. My stomach gave a slow turn. What kind of messages? The kind where your daughter is painting you as an unstable old man who's having some kind of breakdown, she said flatly. She's telling people you're being manipulated by Phoebe and me. That we're gold diggers who convinced you to change your will. I felt my jaw lock so tight it ached. What else? Carmen's breath came sharp through the line. She's saying you have early dementia, that you've been forgetting things and making poor decisions. She's building a case to have your mental competency evaluated. So, that was Natalia's game plan. If she couldn't guilt me into changing my mind, she'd try to strip me of it, have me declared unfit, take control of my finances, maybe even tuck me away somewhere quiet where I couldn't make trouble. She posted it in a private Facebook group for new mothers. Carmen continued. Phoebe's in the same group. She screenshot the messages before Natalia could delete them. Send them to me, I said. Vincent, are you sure? They're pretty awful. Send them. An hour later, Phoebe and I were sitting at her kitchen table, her phone between us. I scrolled through the screenshots in silence, each word hitting like a stone to the ribs. Phrases like clearly not thinking rationally and showing signs of cognitive decline. Accusations that I was being taken advantage of by people who never cared about our family. She'd painted a perfect little picture, a confused old man, manipulated by opportunistic friends circling like vultures. The comments below were worse, strangers urging her to call elder abuse hotlines, offering legal contacts to handle incompetent relatives, telling her how brave she was to endure such a difficult father. I handed the phone back to Phoebe. Make copies of everything. Send them to Camille Davis. Her eyes were wide, her voice small. Uncle Vincent, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was capable of something like this. I did. The words came out quieter than I expected, but the truth was bitter and sharp in my mouth. I just didn't want to see it. That afternoon, I drove to Camille's office. She was waiting for me, standing by her desk with a stack of printouts in one hand and a grim expression that told me this wasn't going to be a conversation I'd enjoy. This changes things, she said without preamble, tapping the top sheet with her finger. Attempting to have you declared incompetent while actively violating the trust conditions. Vincent, that's not just reckless, it's legally actionable. I sat down, leaning forward. What are my options? She slid into her chair, eyes sharp. We can file a defamation suit. We can also accelerate the trust transfer and add additional conditions. Ones that make it impossible for her to challenge your mental competency again. If she wants to play hardball, she pushed the stack toward me. Then we'll show her what hardball really looks like. I didn't even hesitate. Do it. Camille leaned back, studying me for a long moment. Vincent, I have to ask, are you doing this because you're hurt, or because you genuinely believe it's the right thing to do? Her question hung in the air. I thought about Natalia as a little girl, crying in the doorway when her mother left. I thought about her as a teenager, rolling her eyes at my rules, but still hugging me goodnight. I thought about her on her wedding day, asking Jeremiah to walk her down the aisle while I sat in the second row like a family friend, smiling like it didn't sting. Both, I said finally. But mostly because she needs to learn that actions have consequences. I spent 30 years protecting her from the real world. Maybe it's time she experienced it. Camille nodded, already making notes. All right then, I'll have the new documents ready by Monday. I drove home through the molasses crawl of afternoon traffic, past the construction sites where I'd spent most of my career. Honest work, pouring concrete, setting beams, building things that would last. I tried to build something lasting with Natalia, too. Maybe I just used the wrong materials. That evening, Phoebe brought Dahlia over for dinner, 2 years old and already full of questions about everything under the sun. She helped me make grilled cheese sandwiches, standing on a step stool at the counter, her little hands carefully placing cheese slices on the bread as if she were constructing something sacred. Uncle Vincent, she said seriously, tilting her head the way kids do when they're trying to make sense of the world. Mama says you're my fairy godfather now. Something like that, sweetheart. Will you teach me to drive when I'm bigger? Absolutely, I told her without hesitation. Some legacies are worth preserving. Others, well, others need to be started from scratch. The news about the trust fund change hit Denver's social circles like a dropped brick. Camille had arranged for the announcement to appear in the business section of the Denver Post, complete with details about the respect clause violation and the subsequent reallocation of funds to more deserving beneficiaries. I was halfway through my morning coffee when the phone rang. The caller ID made my jaw tighten. Linda. I hadn't heard from her in years, and when I did, it was rarely good news. Vincent, what on earth are you doing? Her voice was sharp, clipped, carrying the same blade's edge I remembered all too well from our divorce proceedings 24 years ago. Good morning to you too, Linda, I said, leaning back in my chair. Jeremiah is beside himself. Natalia's been crying for 3 days. I took another sip of coffee. Is that so? This is insane, she pressed. She's your daughter. Your only child. My only child? I said slowly. Just spent the last week telling people I have dementia and accusing Phoebe of elder abuse. That sound like daughterly behavior to you. She's upset. She made a mistake at the naming ceremony. People say things when they're emotional. People show their true colors when they're emotional. I corrected. There's a difference. Linda was quiet for a moment. Then this is about me, isn't it? I said, keeping my voice even but tight. You're punishing Natalia because I left you. You are not worth my time and energy, Linda. I shot back. This is about your daughter's choices. She was 16 when you abandoned her. Jeremiah's been more of a father to her than the man who raised her alone for 15 years. The one who worked double shifts to pay for her education while you were playing house with your insurance salesman. That's not fair. Fair? Why should it be fair? I laughed, though it wasn't the kind of laugh that made anyone comfortable. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been you stepping up to be a mother. Fair would have been Jeremiah acknowledging that Natalia already had a father. Fair would have been my daughter remembering who sacrificed everything for her before she decided to erase me from her son's life. Fair would have been me walking her down the aisle, not her fancy stepfather. I let that slide, Linda, but not anymore. Her tone softened, but only slightly. Vincent, please. She's talking about legal action, challenging your mental state. I want her to try, I said, the words landing hard. I've got documentation of everything, every message, every post, including her little social media campaign. If she wants to make this public, I'm ready. There was a pause, and for a second I thought she might fire back. Instead, she hung up without saying goodbye. Typical Linda. Some things never change. The fallout came fast, and without mercy. Bennett's business partners at Aldrich Press started circling with questions, polite on the surface but sharp underneath, about family stability and public relations concerns. 3 potential investors quietly pulled out of upcoming meetings, citing the need to reassess the management team's judgment. The publishing world was smaller than most people realized, and family drama had a way of making people nervous about million-dollar deals. Bennett called me personally on Thursday afternoon. His voice was smooth, the kind of polished calm you expect from someone used to handling crises behind closed doors. Mr. Moore, I think there's been a misunderstanding, he began. Natalia never meant to exclude you from Andrew's life. She was just acknowledging Jeremiah's role in her upbringing by saying he'd be Andrew's only grandfather. Poor phrasing, nothing more. I felt a bitter laugh rising, but held it down. She's devastated by your reaction, Bennett continued. Not as devastated as she's going to be, I said sharply. He sighed, a practiced sound of concession. Look, I get that you're hurt, but this situation is affecting more than just family relationships. It's affecting my company. Your company's problems aren't my concern, Bennett. I shot back. Maybe you should have thought about that before you let your wife disrespect her father in public. There was a pause on the line, as if he was measuring how far to push. What would it take to resolve this? Some kind of apology? A public acknowledgement? Nothing, I said flatly. It's done. Mr. Moore, please. We can work something out. Natalia's willing to do whatever it takes. I felt my hands tighten on the phone. 2 weeks ago, she was willing to do whatever it took, too. Turns out that included questioning my mental competency and accusing Phoebe of manipulation. So no, Bennett. We can't work something out. I hung up and immediately dialed Carmen. How's Phoebe doing with all this attention? I asked as soon as she answered. She's worried about you, Carmen said softly. She feels guilty about the money, I told her. Tell her guilt's a luxury she can't afford. That money is for Dahlia's future, and Dahlia is going to need every advantage she can get. What about Natalia? What about her? I whispered, more to myself than to Carmen. She's still your daughter. My daughter died the day she decided Jeremiah was the only family that mattered, I said firmly. Some bridges burn themselves. Others, you light the match. The final blow came 3 weeks after the naming ceremony, when Camille filed the defamation suit. The lawsuit was thorough. Camille didn't leave anything to chance. We included screenshots of Natalia's social media posts, sworn statements from witnesses who had been at the naming ceremony, and medical documentation proving my mental competency. That same day, the Denver Post picked up the story. The headline was blunt and unambiguous. Local businessman sues daughter for defamation following trust fund dispute. The article laid out the facts clearly. The trust fund transfer, the respect clause violation, and Natalia's attempts to question my mental state. It painted a vivid picture. Wealthy father protecting himself from ungrateful daughter's false accusations. Within hours, Natalia's lawyer was on the phone with Camille, requesting a meeting to discuss settlement options. Too late for that. Bennett's business unraveled faster than a house of cards caught in a gust. Investors fled like rats from a sinking ship. Authors tore up their contracts. Aldrich Press's board of directors voted to remove Bennett from his position as executive editor. The company's stock price plunged 30% in just 2 days. Jeremiah tried calling me once. Left a rambling voicemail about family forgiveness and Christian values. I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. The best part was watching it all unfold from the sidelines. I didn't have to do anything except exist and let the consequences play out naturally. Natalia had destroyed her own reputation, damaged her husband's career, and lost $2 million in the process. She showed up at my apartment on a Tuesday evening looking like she hadn't slept in days. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore sweatpants with an old college hoodie, far from the polished woman I remembered. "Dad, please, can we just talk?" she asked, her voice barely steady. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Nothing to talk about." She took a shaky breath. "I was wrong about everything. The toast, the social media posts, all of it. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix anything, Natalia. What do you want me to do? Make a public apology? Tell everyone you're a good father, a good grandfather? Whatever you need." She looked like she was about to say something, but I cut her off. "I don't need anything from you anymore." Then she started crying, quiet at first, then full sobs, standing there in my doorway like a lost child. For a moment, something stirred inside me. Maybe pity, or just muscle memory from 30 years of being her father. But then I remembered her words at the naming ceremony, the Facebook posts, the calculated cruelty of it all. "The trust fund money's gone, Natalia," I said quietly. "It's in Dahlia's name now. Can't be changed. I don't care about the money." "Yes, you do. And even if you didn't, it wouldn't matter. You made your choice. I made a mistake. You made a series of deliberate decisions. Live with them." I closed the door. 6 months later, I was teaching Dahlia to fish at Cherry Creek Reservoir. She was 3 now, old enough to hold a kid-sized rod, and pepper me with endless questions about why fish live underwater and whether they get cold in the winter. "Uncle Vincent, look." She pointed at her bobber dancing on the water surface. "Is that a fish?" "Maybe," I said, steadying her rod. "Keep it steady." We didn't catch anything that day, but Dahlia didn't care. She was far more interested in the ducks paddling nearby and the way the sunlight sparkled across the water. Phoebe sat beside us on the dock, reading a book but glancing up now and then to smile at her daughter's chatter. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Simple, honest, built on love instead of obligation. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Natalia and Bennett had moved to Phoenix. Something about a fresh start and new opportunities. Jeremiah was helping them financially, which seemed fitting in a way. Let them be each other's family, then. The defamation lawsuit had been settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. I donated the settlement to a scholarship fund for single fathers. Some victories are worth more than money. One afternoon, Phoebe's husband, Carlos, joined us for lunch at a little restaurant overlooking the reservoir. Carlos was a good man, worked as a firefighter, steady and kind, and he treated Phoebe and Dahlia like they hung the moon. We talked about normal things. Work, the weather, Dahlia's upcoming birthday party. As we were leaving, Dahlia tugged at my sleeve. "Uncle Vincent," she asked, her eyes wide and hopeful. "Will you come to my birthday?" "Wouldn't miss it, sweetheart," I said, smiling down at her. She wrapped those small, fierce arms around my leg, and I felt something settle deep in my chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the quiet knowledge that some relationships are worth protecting, while others need to be left behind. Natalia had taught me that blood doesn't automatically mean family, but Dahlia was teaching me that family doesn't automatically require blood. Sometimes, the people who choose to love you are worth more than the ones who are supposed to. The consequences for Natalia and Bennett hit hard and didn't let up. Bennett never got his old life back in publishing. I heard he took a junior role at some small press down in Phoenix, earning a fraction of what he used to. The business associates who once vied for his attention now steered clear, seeing him as a liability rather than an asset. Natalia wasn't spared either. The Denver social circles she'd worked so hard to enter shut their doors on her. Her reputation was permanently stained by the very public family scandal she'd ignited. Jeremiah's money kept them afloat, but it was a fragile kind of survival. The lifestyle they'd built, the parties, the status, the influence, it all crumbled under the weight of their choices. They lived quietly now, far from the spotlight they once chased, slowly learning what I'd come to understand long ago. Actions have consequences, and those consequences reach far beyond the moment they're made. In the end, I realized the strongest foundation isn't built on blood or obligation. It's built on mutual respect and genuine love. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.